Imagine stepping into a bedroom in Victorian England, the air filled with the faint scent of wood polish and the soft echo of footsteps on creaking floorboards. The centerpiece of the room is not a fluffy mattress or a soft feather bed, as one might expect today, but a wooden frame stretched taut with a web of ropes. These were known as rope beds, a common sight in Victorian homes, inns, and even the bedrooms of the wealthy. At first glance, the concept might seem primitive or even absurd. Why would anyone willingly sleep on a bed made of rope, tightened over a bare wooden frame? And yet, for Victorians, this was not only normal, it was considered essential for health, hygiene, and proper rest. Rope beds had been in use for centuries, long before the Victorian era, and they were a practical solution in a time before the mass production of modern mattresses. The ropes were usually made of strong materials like hemp or manila, woven tightly across the bed frame to create a flexible surface. Over time, the ropes would stretch, sag, or loosen, which could make the bed uncomfortable. This meant that rope beds required regular maintenance, a fact that many people of the era considered a small price to pay for a good night's sleep. But what made this even more intriguing was the fact that inns and boarding houses would actually charge extra for a properly tightened bed. Guests would pay a few pence for the labor involved in tightening the ropes, as a saggy rope bed could turn a night of sleep into an ordeal. In some ways, the extra cost was not just for comfort, it was a guarantee of the restorative sleep that the Victorians so highly prized. The connection between rope beds and health is perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of Victorian domestic life. People in the 19th century were obsessed with posture, circulation, and bodily wellness, even if they did not have the medical understanding we take for granted today. A taut, supportive bed was thought to prevent back problems and ensure that the sleeper maintained proper alignment during the night. Doctors and health writers of the era often advised their patients to avoid soft, sagging beds, which they believed could lead to physical ailments. The idea of paying extra for a tightened rope bed may seem absurd to a modern audience, accustomed to plush mattresses and memory foam, but in the Victorian mindset, it was an investment in one's health and longevity. Maintaining a rope bed was a task in itself. Families would own a small tool known as a bed key or bed wrench, a simple wooden or metal device used to twist the ropes and bring them back to their proper tension. This was not a one-time task. The ropes needed regular adjustment as they stretched under the weight of sleepers over time. Tightening the bed was almost a ritual, something that demonstrated care, diligence, and attention to domestic order. In boarding houses, the innkeepers would employ staff specifically for this task, or charge guests for its service. This practice reflected a larger Victorian ethos, the belief that meticulous attention to daily life, even in something as simple as tightening ropes on a bed, contributed to moral virtue and personal discipline. The rope bed also had an unexpected social dimension. In an era when social class was keenly observed and daily life was governed by strict norms, the condition of one's bed could signal wealth, refinement, and attentiveness to detail. A sagging, untended bed could suggest neglect or lower social status, while a taut, well-maintained bed conveyed propriety and good taste. For inns and boarding houses, a rope bed in perfect condition was a selling point, a tangible assurance that guests would experience comfort, cleanliness, and care. In some ways, the rope bed became a symbol of Victorian domestic pride, a reflection of the family's or establishment's commitment to maintaining high standards. But rope beds were not just functional, they were also surprisingly versatile. Depending on the design, the tension of the ropes could be adjusted to suit individual preferences, and sometimes a mattress or a straw-filled tick would be laid on top for added comfort. People experimented with different fillings, from horsehair and feathers to wool or cotton, to soften the firm rope base. The bed itself could be raised or lowered on its frame, offering further customization. In essence, the rope bed was an early form of adjustable sleep technology, a testament to the ingenuity of Victorian design within the limitations of the time. It is also worth noting that the rope bed played a role in the broader culture of the Victorian bedroom. Bedrooms were spaces of both privacy and display. The meticulous arrangement of sheets, blankets, and the bed itself reflected the household's taste and social standing. A well-kept rope bed contributed to the overall aesthetic, signaling orderliness and refinement. Visitors to a home would notice the bed immediately. Its taut ropes and neatly arranged coverings communicated care and domestic skill. In this sense, the rope bed was not merely a place to sleep. It was an expression of social values, a stage on which the moral and practical virtues of the household were showcased. Yet, despite its widespread use and social significance, the rope bed was not without discomfort. Sleeping on taut ropes could be hard on the body, especially for those unaccustomed to it. The ropes could dig into the skin, causing temporary discomfort until the sleeper adjusted. Winter nights were particularly challenging, as the ropes could contract in cold weather, creating uneven surfaces. For this reason, people often layered additional padding, such as blankets or mattress ticks, on top of the ropes to create a more forgiving surface. These adaptations reveal the Victorian approach to problem solving, practical, resourceful, and deeply attuned to the balance between comfort, health, and propriety. Rope beds also inspired a certain communal ingenuity. Families and friends would gather to help tighten the ropes, a task that required both strength and precision. In inns, staff might coordinate their efforts to quickly prepare multiple beds for incoming guests, often performing the work with a surprising level of efficiency and care. Stories from the period describe lively discussions and instructions being passed among household members as they adjusted ropes, sharing tips on optimal tension and the best materials for padding. In this way, the simple act of preparing a rope bed became a shared experience, fostering both collaboration and conversation. The economic dimension of rope beds is equally intriguing. Paying extra for a tightened bed may seem quaint, but it reflects the larger commercial and social environment of Victorian England. Inns competed for clientele, and offering beds in perfect condition could mean the difference between attracting a wealthy traveler or losing them to a competitor. For urban residents, especially those living in rented accommodations or boarding houses, the bed became a point of negotiation, a tangible commodity for which quality and maintenance could be directly purchased. This microcosm of economic exchange highlights how even the most intimate aspects of daily life were shaped by broader social and financial forces. From a historical perspective, rope beds also offer insight into Victorian attitudes toward innovation and adaptation. While the bed's basic design had existed for centuries, Victorians refined the concept, experimenting with materials, tensioning methods, and combinations of padding to optimize comfort. The willingness to pay for improvements to fine-tune a seemingly simple object reflects a broader cultural trait, an appetite for progress, refinement, and meticulous attention to detail. The rope bed, humble as it may seem, embodies the Victorian ethos of careful craftsmanship, social awareness, and practical ingenuity. It is important to remember, too, that the rope bed represents a bridge between eras. It was an object that persisted into the early 20th century, gradually giving way to sprung mattresses, inner springs, and later, foam technology. Yet, for generations of Victorians, the rope bed was a familiar, reliable, and socially significant part of life. It was the bed upon which children were rocked to sleep, adults rested after long days of work, and travelers found temporary comfort on journeys across England and beyond. Its ubiquity makes it an intimate lens through which we can view the rhythms, concerns, and values of Victorian society. Beyond its practical function, the rope bed also reflects a fascinating psychological dimension. The act of tightening ropes, of ensuring a firm, supportive surface, could be seen as a form of control in a world that was often unpredictable. Life in Victorian England, especially in rapidly growing industrial cities, was full of uncertainty. Disease, economic fluctuation, and social upheaval were everyday realities. The rope bed, taut and adjustable, offered a small but meaningful sense of mastery over one's immediate environment. It was a nightly ritual that provided comfort not just physically, but mentally, signaling that order and care were possible even in a world of chaos. Culturally, rope beds became intertwined with the identity of the Victorian bedroom. Literature, diaries, and periodicals of the time often mentioned the importance of a well-maintained bed. Advice manuals instructed households on how to properly tighten ropes, adjust padding, and ensure a restful night's sleep. The bed was not a passive object. It was an active participant in the domestic sphere, shaping routines, comfort, and the overall quality of life. In this way, rope beds were more than furniture. They were instruments of health, decorum, and social expression. Finally, considering the rope bed from a modern perspective, it is almost surreal. We are accustomed to mattresses that mold to our bodies, beds that offer springs, foam, and a variety of firmness options at the touch of a button. To think that someone would pay extra simply to have ropes tightened over a frame may feel absurd, even comical. Yet, when we look closer, the rope bed embodies a combination of practicality, social awareness, and cultural values that makes it deeply human. It is a testament to the ways in which people adapt, innovate, and negotiate comfort within the constraints of their time. The story of the Victorian rope bed reminds us that history is not just about kings, wars, or political revolutions. It is about the daily choices people made, the objects they valued, and the small rituals that shaped their lives. Sleeping on a rope bed, paying extra for proper tension, adjusting the ropes with care, and layering blankets or ticks to perfect comfort, all of this tells us something profound about the Victorians. They were meticulous, inventive, socially conscious, and deeply invested in the quality of their daily lives. And while the ropes themselves may have sagged over time, the cultural and historical significance of these humble beds remains taut and enduring in our imagination. In the end, the Victorian rope bed is a fascinating window into the past. It is a reminder that what seems strange to us today was once ordinary, practical, and even essential. It reveals a society attentive to health, comfort, and social propriety, willing to pay for innovation and maintenance, and capable of finding order and satisfaction in even the simplest of domestic tasks. So, the next time you lie down on your modern mattress, take a moment to imagine tightening ropes over a wooden frame, paying extra for proper tension, and experiencing the peculiar, yet deeply human, comfort of a Victorian rope bed. It is a story that stretches across centuries, connecting us to a world that was at once strange, fascinating, and undeniably alive with curiosity and care. Victorian England is often remembered for its innovation, industry, and strict social etiquette, but one of the most fascinating aspects of life during this era was its obsession with health. The Victorians were consumed by ideas of hygiene, bodily wellness, and longevity, sometimes to extraordinary, even bizarre extremes. It was a time when medical knowledge was advancing rapidly, yet still entwined with superstition, popular belief, and a deeply ingrained desire to control the human body. This fascination with health touched every aspect of daily life, from diet and exercise to sleep, posture, and even the way one sat or breathed. And while some of their practices were undeniably beneficial, others now seem absurd or even hazardous when viewed through the lens of modern science. Take, for instance, the vibrating chair. To a modern observer, it might sound like something straight out of a science fiction story. A chair designed to shake or vibrate gently while a person sat in it, with the promise of stimulating circulation, improving muscle tone, and warding off illness. Yet in Victorian England, vibrating chairs were sold and marketed to a wide audience. Manuals and advertisements claimed that the motion could prevent lethargy, counteract the effects of sedentary work, and even improve one's general health over time. People would sit in these contraptions for hours, trusting that the simple act of vibration could strengthen their bodies, keep blood flowing, and ensure that their internal organs remained in balance. In an era before gyms, fitness machines, or personal trainers, such devices represented both innovation and hope. They reflected a growing belief that technology could be harnessed to improve the human body, a notion that was revolutionary at the time, even if the methods seem comical today. But vibrating chairs were just the tip of the iceberg. Victorian obsession with health extended to every corner of life, often taking forms that seem peculiar to us now. Dental hygiene, for example, was an area of intense focus, though Victorian methods were sometimes harsh or abrasive. Tooth powders made from crushed oyster shells, charcoal, or even pumice stone were popular, advertised as ways to whiten teeth and prevent decay. Brushing techniques were rudimentary by modern standards, and toothpaste as we know it did not exist in most homes. These powders were sprinkled on damp brushes or even rubbed directly onto the teeth, with the belief that the abrasive properties would scour away impurities. While the intent was to promote dental health, the actual effect could be damaging, gradually eroding enamel over time. Yet the effort reflects a deep concern with personal cleanliness and appearance, a concern that permeated Victorian society. Corsetry provides another fascinating example of the lengths to which Victorians would go in pursuit of health, beauty, and social propriety. Today, corsets are often associated solely with aesthetic restriction, shaping the waist and supporting fashionable silhouettes. In the Victorian mindset, however, they were also seen as instruments of physical wellness. A tightly laced corset was believed to encourage proper posture, support the spine, and even prevent deformities. Medical manuals of the era recommended corsetry for women of certain ages or social standing, claiming that it would ensure proper organ alignment and promote elegance. Of course, the reality was more complicated. Corsets could constrict breathing, impede digestion, and cause fainting or long-term internal issues if worn excessively. Yet for Victorians, the benefits, both aesthetic and perceived medical, often outweighed the risks. Corsets were a physical manifestation of the era's insistence that self-control, discipline, and appearance were inseparable from health. Beyond the home, Victorians were endlessly inventive in devising devices to optimize bodily function. Nose straighteners, for example, were marketed to parents and adults alike. These small contraptions, often made of wire or metal, were intended to reshape the nasal structure over time. The idea was that a properly aligned nose was not only more attractive, but also healthier, promoting proper breathing and overall well-being. While modern medicine would cringe at the thought of using such devices outside a surgical context, the popularity of nose straighteners underscores the Victorian belief that physical perfection and health could be engineered through persistent, deliberate effort. Every tool, every contraption, and every regimen reflected a culture in which appearance and health were intimately intertwined. Dietary habits in the Victorian era were also shaped by an obsessive concern with health, often informed by moral or social codes. People were advised to eat foods that promoted vitality, digestion, and longevity, with elaborate systems categorizing foods as hot or cold, nourishing or purifying. Fad diets were common, with some individuals avoiding meat entirely, while others experimented with strict regimens designed to cleanse the body. Foods were sometimes fortified with minerals or herbs, based on the prevailing medical theories of the time. Tea, for instance, was not just a beverage, but a daily ritual believed to aid digestion and maintain energy. These practices, while occasionally beneficial, often reflected a blend of scientific curiosity and superstition, showing the Victorians' remarkable willingness to experiment in pursuit of health. Exercise, too, was highly prescribed, though Victorian methods were idiosyncratic by today's standards. Gymnasiums began to appear in urban areas, offering structured routines for strength and agility. Calisthenics, walking, horseback riding, and fencing were recommended, particularly for the upper classes, while industrial workers might have relied on their labor for physical activity. What stands out is the meticulous attention to the body. Every movement, every posture, every moment of rest or activity was observed for its potential impact on health. The Victorians sought a balance between exertion and restraint, believing that the right combination could prolong life and improve the quality of daily living. Hygiene, an area of extreme importance to the Victorians, also produced peculiar trends and devices. Soap became an almost sacred commodity, and elaborate bath routines were promoted in literature, magazines, and medical advice books. Public baths were established in cities for those without private facilities, reflecting a communal investment in cleanliness. Yet alongside these rational measures, there were eccentric inventions designed to enhance hygiene and bodily care. Mechanical combs, steam inhalers, and even early forms of electric massage devices were sold to households, promising to prevent illness and invigorate the body. Some of these devices were effective to a degree, others were purely ornamental or fanciful, demonstrating the era's willingness to embrace both science and spectacle. Mental health and relaxation were also considered vital components of bodily wellness. The Victorians recognized that the mind and body were connected, though their understanding was rudimentary compared to modern psychology. Rest, sleep, and controlled leisure were prescribed to prevent nervous exhaustion, a condition widely diagnosed among the urban middle and upper classes. Reading, music, and moderate social engagement were encouraged, but excessive stimulation, particularly from noisy environments or improper posture, was believed to threaten health. This focus on mental as well as physical well-being illustrates the holistic approach of Victorian health culture, even if the remedies and devices sometimes appear strange to us today. The obsession with health extended to clothing beyond corsets. Shoes, gloves, hats, and even undergarments were designed with circulation, support, and posture in mind. People were encouraged to select materials that would prevent chafing or irritation and support the body in alignment with contemporary theories of anatomy. Hats were not only fashionable but also protective, shielding the head and brain from drafts or sun exposure. Gloves were worn to prevent skin disease and maintain cleanliness. Each layer of clothing served a purpose beyond mere appearance, reflecting a culture that fused style, morality, and medical belief into a single guiding principle. The body must be managed, maintained, and perfected. Among the most curious examples of Victorian health obsession were therapeutic devices and contraptions designed for the home. The vibrating chair is perhaps the most famous, but there were countless others. Foot warmers, posture correctors, mechanical massagers, and even steam-powered bathing machines were marketed to the public as essential tools for daily wellness. Many were accompanied by detailed instruction manuals promising long-term benefits if used diligently. Some of these devices were actually effective in promoting comfort or circulation. Others were less so, relying on the novelty of motion or sensation to give the illusion of health improvement. What remains striking is the faith Victorians placed in mechanical intervention, a belief that science and technology could conquer natural human limitations. Medical advice in periodicals, books, and newspapers reinforced these practices, blending empirical observation with anecdotal evidence and moral guidance. Victorians read about cures, exercises, and preventative measures alongside stories of successful socialites and industrious citizens who embodied the ideals of health and decorum. Health was not simply a private matter, it was a social and moral expectation. To neglect the body, even in small ways, could signal sloth, ignorance, or moral weakness. This intertwining of health and virtue created an environment in which bizarre practices, strict routines, and elaborate contraptions were not just tolerated, they were admired. One of the most remarkable aspects of Victorian health trends is how widely they were embraced across social classes. While the wealthy had access to specialized devices, spas, and private instructors, the middle and working classes also participated in health rituals, often adapting them to fit modest budgets. Public lectures, newspapers, and pamphlets offered guidance on stretching, posture, diet, and hygiene that could be followed in modest homes. Even the lower classes, who might not afford expensive devices or treatments, often took cues from the behaviors and recommendations of the elite, reflecting a culture of shared aspiration toward bodily discipline and wellness. The underlying philosophy of these trends is worth noting. Victorians believed that the body was a machine that could be maintained, adjusted, and improved with effort and attention. Disease, weakness, or deformity was often attributed to negligence, improper habits, or moral failings, rather than random chance. In this context, the invention of vibrating chairs, abrasive tooth powders, and nose straighteners can be understood not merely as eccentricities, but as logical extensions of a world in which human health was an active responsibility. Every action, every tool, every regimen contributed to the careful management of the self, a reflection of the era's obsession with control, refinement, and moral order. Even today, the bizarre nature of some Victorian health trends fascinates historians, anthropologists, and casual observers alike. The vibrating chair, with its promise of circulation and vigor, seems almost comical when juxtaposed with our modern fitness equipment, yet it embodies the same desire to optimize the human body through technology. Tooth powders and corsets reveal the tension between appearance, health, and social expectation, reminding us that cultural beliefs shape even the most intimate practices of daily life. Each device, contraption, and routine offers a glimpse into a world in which the pursuit of wellness was a matter of both necessity and pride, creativity and obsession. The story of Victorian health trends is ultimately a story about human curiosity, ingenuity, and the desire to master one's environment. From vibrating chairs to abrasive tooth powders, from restrictive corsets to nose straighteners, the Victorians experimented with their bodies in ways that were sometimes effective, sometimes harmful, but always reflective of a culture deeply invested in health, propriety, and control. Their fascination with wellness reminds us that even in an era without modern medicine, people sought ways to understand, manage, and improve their physical lives, often with remarkable creativity and persistence. In looking back on these practices, it is easy to laugh, to marvel, and even to cringe. Yet we can also see ourselves in the Victorians, in their desire to live better, stronger, and longer lives, in their willingness to embrace invention, and in their belief that effort, discipline, and attention could shape the human body and spirit. The vibrating chair, the tooth powders, the corsets, the nose straighteners, all are artifacts of a culture that took the care of the body seriously, sometimes absurdly so, but always with genuine intent and curiosity. The Victorian obsession with health, in its many strange and remarkable forms, is a vivid reminder that history is not only about politics or war, but about the ordinary, everyday lives of people. It is about their hopes, their fears, their inventions, and their rituals. It is about the human impulse to improve, to perfect, and to control the self. And it is about the lengths to which people will go to feel well, look well, and live in harmony with the expectations of their society. By exploring these trends, we gain insight not only into Victorian culture, but into the enduring human desire to master the body, to pursue wellness, and to leave a mark of care, discipline, and ingenuity on the world around us. The Victorian era was a time of immense technological progress and relentless curiosity. Factories were humming, cities were growing, and new inventions were appearing at a pace that astonished the public. Yet the ingenuity of the Victorians was not confined to factories, machines, or industrial applications. It extended deeply into daily life. Every household, every street, and every personal routine was a canvas for innovation. Some of these inventions were practical, some were whimsical, and some were downright bizarre. To understand the mind of a Victorian, one must embrace both the brilliance and the absurdity of their creations, for they reveal not only a desire for convenience, but also a fascination with novelty and experimentation. Take, for example, the phenomenon of the umbrella hat. Today, the image of someone walking down the street with a tiny umbrella perched on their head evokes amusement, yet in Victorian England, the umbrella hat was a serious, if eccentric, solution to a common problem: unpredictable weather. People wanted to remain dry while keeping their hands free, and the umbrella hat provided a practical, though unusual, answer. Made of fabric stretched over a small metal frame, these hats could be adjusted to shade the face, neck, and shoulders from rain or sun. They were marketed as tools of efficiency and convenience, allowing pedestrians to carry parcels, books, or tools without struggling to manage a conventional umbrella. Though they never achieved widespread popularity, the umbrella hat stands as a testament to the Victorian willingness to experiment and embrace novelty. Mechanical beds were another marvel of the era, combining engineering ingenuity with domestic comfort. Some designs allowed the bed to lift or recline automatically, functioning as an early form of adjustable sleep technology. The idea was to enhance comfort, ease mobility, and even promote better health by positioning the body optimally during rest. These beds often relied on complex systems of levers, pulleys, or springs, and were considered luxury items, accessible only to the wealthy. To modern eyes, they may seem like the precursor to an over-engineered gadget, yet they reflect a serious Victorian commitment to optimizing life at every possible level. The mechanical bed was not merely a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of control, sophistication, and the merging of engineering with daily living. Victorians also explored personal transportation in ways that seem startling today. Steam-powered carriages were introduced as an alternative to horse-drawn vehicles. While these early vehicles were revolutionary, they were also unpredictable and often dangerous. Steam engines could overheat or explode, yet their promise captivated inventors and consumers alike. The excitement surrounding these vehicles was part of a broader cultural fascination with harnessing energy, speed, and technology for personal convenience. People were willing to risk discomfort, expense, and even danger to experience the thrill of mechanized motion, demonstrating a uniquely Victorian blend of bravery, curiosity, and ambition. Daily domestic life was also filled with inventive solutions for common problems. Victorian inventors applied their ingenuity to cooking, cleaning, and managing the home. Mechanical devices such as egg beaters, washing machines, and butter churns were introduced to reduce labor and increase efficiency. These machines were often manually operated, requiring clever mechanisms of gears, cranks, and levers. Housewives, particularly in middle-class households, embraced these devices as tools to enhance productivity, reduce fatigue, and maintain standards of cleanliness. The widespread adoption of these domestic inventions reflects a culture that valued efficiency and technological progress, while also blurring the line between necessity and novelty. Some inventions, however, were more whimsical than practical. Take, for instance, the various types of automatic musical devices designed to entertain at home. Phonographs, mechanical organs, and even self-playing pianos became popular, allowing people to enjoy music without the skill or effort of performance. These devices were celebrated not only for their novelty, but for the social cachet they conferred. Hosting a mechanical musical device was a statement of refinement, wealth, and engagement with modern technology. Music, entertainment, and invention converged in a uniquely Victorian fashion, illustrating the era's fascination with combining function, aesthetics, and amusement. The Victorians' curiosity often extended to bodily enhancement and comfort. Steam, powered bath devices, reclining chairs, and early massage machines were designed to improve circulation, relieve tension, or simply make daily routines more pleasant. While some of these inventions were effective, others were more speculative, relying on the promise of wellness rather than scientifically verified results. Still, the belief in their potential illustrates a culture of experimentation, a willingness to integrate technology into every aspect of life, and a desire to conquer the physical challenges of human existence through ingenuity. Even clothing became a canvas for invention. Victorian hats, gloves, and shoes were designed with practical as well as aesthetic purposes in mind. Shoes with reinforced soles and arch support were marketed as improving posture and walking comfort. Gloves were designed not just for warmth, but for hygiene and social decorum. Hats incorporated brims, feathers, and occasionally mechanical elements to shield wearers from the sun or rain. In essence, fashion was inseparable from function. Each item was engineered to meet specific needs while maintaining a standard of elegance. This approach illustrates the Victorian mindset that beauty and utility should coexist, and that attention to detail in even minor personal items was both a practical and moral obligation. In addition to these household and personal inventions, Victorians were fascinated by ways to improve sleep and daily rest. Beyond mechanical beds, devices such as bed warmers, adjustable pillows, and specially designed mattresses were employed to optimize comfort and health. Sleep was considered essential to moral and physical well-being, and inventors explored every avenue to enhance the quality of nightly rest. Even the design of rooms, the placement of furniture, and the type of bedding were subject to experimentation and debate, reflecting the era's belief in the power of environment and design to shape human health and productivity. The era also produced inventions intended for public spaces. Street lamps, escalators, and early elevators transformed urban life, making cities more navigable and accessible. While these devices were not used inside the home, they influenced daily routines profoundly, changing the way people interacted with the world around them. Victorians eagerly embraced technology that promised to save time, reduce effort, and enhance convenience, whether in the private sphere or in public. These innovations were celebrated in newspapers, exhibitions, and world fairs, capturing the imagination of a population increasingly confident in human ingenuity. Some of the most memorable Victorian inventions were small, peculiar gadgets that combined humor, novelty, and practical purpose. Mechanical fans, automatic can openers, and early sewing machines delighted users by making tedious tasks faster and easier. Pocket watches, with elaborate mechanisms and decorative cases, merged artistry with precision engineering. Even something as simple as a letter opener or a candle snuffer could become a mechanical marvel, reflecting the era's appetite for refinement, creativity, and efficiency. These objects were often celebrated not only for their functionality, but for the pleasure they brought to daily life, reminding us that the Victorians found joy in the cleverness of design as much as in its practical utility. Inventions extended into the realm of personal safety and convenience as well. Early fire extinguishers, safety razors, and emergency whistles were marketed to households and travelers alike. These devices reflect a Victorian understanding of risk and the desire to mitigate danger through ingenuity. They also reveal a broader cultural belief that preparation, diligence, and technological intervention could protect the individual from the uncertainties of life. The emphasis on foresight, control, and self-reliance runs through many of the inventions of this era, highlighting a world view in which human ingenuity was the key to comfort, security, and success. Even food preparation inspired mechanical creativity. Victorians devised devices to automate tedious tasks such as grinding coffee, slicing bread, or stirring mixtures. Some of these inventions were powered by hand cranks, others by steam, and a few by early forms of electricity. The goal was efficiency, to reduce labor while increasing precision, consistency, and hygiene. Cookbooks of the period often included advice on how to best use these devices, integrating mechanical innovation into domestic routines. The widespread adoption of such inventions illustrates how seriously Victorians took the improvement of everyday life, embracing technology not only as a novelty, but as a means of enhancing human capability and convenience. The Victorians' inventive spirit extended to leisure and recreation. Games, puzzles, and toys were redesigned with mechanical ingenuity. Clockwork animals, automated dolls, and interactive toys delighted children and adults alike. These devices reflected a fascination with movement, mechanics, and mimicry, demonstrating how Victorian creativity was not confined to practical concerns, but also embraced entertainment, wonder, and play. Mechanical toys were celebrated for their ability to teach, amuse, and inspire curiosity, emphasizing the era's belief that technology could enrich both the mind and the spirit. Science, experimentation, and invention often converged in public exhibitions. The Great Exhibition of 1851 in London, for example, showcased countless innovations in machinery, household devices, and personal gadgets. Visitors marveled at mechanical marvels, some practical, some whimsical, all demonstrating the ingenuity of human design. These exhibitions fostered a culture of admiration for inventiveness, encouraging individuals to apply creativity and technical skill to everyday life. The emphasis on novelty, spectacle, and ingenuity reinforced a social value system, in which invention was celebrated, experimentation rewarded, and the boundaries of possibility constantly tested. The creativity of the Victorian inventor often blurred the line between utility and absurdity. Devices like steam-powered hair curlers, automatic hand-washing machines, and self-stirring teapots were marketed with great enthusiasm, even if their practical benefits were limited. These inventions reveal the era's willingness to experiment, to push the boundaries of what was considered possible, and to find delight in the clever application of mechanics to mundane tasks. Humor, ingenuity, and curiosity were intertwined, demonstrating that innovation was as much about exploration as it was about necessity. One of the most striking aspects of Victorian daily inventions is the meticulous attention to detail. Devices were often crafted with elegance, incorporating decorative elements alongside functional design. Brass fittings, polished wood, and intricate gears were common, reflecting a cultural desire for beauty, craftsmanship, and refinement. Even a simple tool or household appliance became a testament to the skill of the maker, embodying both practicality and artistry. This fusion of utility and aesthetics is a hallmark of the period, emphasizing that every object, no matter how mundane, could be elevated by careful design and attention to detail. In addition to mechanical and household inventions, Victorians explored ways to improve communication and information access. Mechanical pencils, typewriters, and early telegraph systems transformed the way people wrote, recorded, and transmitted information. These innovations reflect the broader intellectual and cultural environment of the era, emphasizing efficiency, clarity, and speed. They also demonstrate a desire to harness technology to enhance human capability, reflecting the same mindset that produced strange beds, umbrella hats, and vibrating chairs, a belief that clever design could improve the quality, comfort, and productivity of daily life. Finally, the strange and whimsical inventions of the Victorian era offer a window into the values, priorities, and imagination of the time. Whether practical or fantastical, each device represents a culture deeply invested in improvement, experimentation, and creativity. The Victorian approach to daily life was characterized by meticulous attention, inventiveness, and a willingness to embrace the new, however unusual it might appear. From umbrella hats to mechanical beds, from steam-powered carriages to interactive toys, the era's innovations reflect a society in which technology, aesthetics, and human curiosity were inseparable. In exploring these inventions, we gain insight not only into Victorian ingenuity, but into the human spirit more broadly. The desire to create, to solve problems, to entertain, and to optimize daily life is timeless. The Victorians' strange devices remind us that innovation is often messy, playful, and surprising. They demonstrate that the pursuit of improvement can take forms that are functional, whimsical, or even absurd, and that curiosity and creativity are fundamental aspects of human experience. The strange inventions of daily life in Victorian England remain enduring symbols of an era in which imagination, mechanics, and human aspiration converge. They tell us about the priorities of a society that valued efficiency, comfort, and novelty, but also about the human impulse to experiment, explore, and delight in the application of technology to everyday challenges. In the end, these inventions are more than historical curiosities. They are reflections of a mindset that sought to master the material world, to improve the quality of life, and to find wonder, humor, and ingenuity in the ordinary. Through these devices, whether practical or peculiar, we glimpse the inventiveness, audacity, and creativity of Victorian society. The legacy of these inventions reminds us that the human drive to innovate, to explore the boundaries of possibility, and to enhance daily life is as strong today as it was over a century ago. The strange gadgets, mechanical marvels, and whimsical contraptions of Victorian England continue to fascinate, inspire, and entertain, offering a vivid portrait of a world in which invention was not merely a pursuit of utility, but an expression of imagination, curiosity, and delight. Victorian England is often remembered for its strict social codes, elaborate etiquette, and obsession with appearances, yet what many find most fascinating about this era is how deeply these rules penetrated everyday life. The social customs of the time were not merely formalities. They were mechanisms that structured society, reinforced hierarchy, and provided a sense of order in an increasingly complex world. From the moment one left the house in the morning to the smallest interaction with neighbors or acquaintances, there were expectations, rituals, and unspoken rules governing behavior. These customs could appear elaborate, peculiar, and even absurd by modern standards, but they reveal a culture deeply invested in propriety, morality, and social harmony, a society where the way one presented oneself could influence personal fortune, reputation, and relationships. Consider the seemingly simple act of visiting a friend or acquaintance. In Victorian England, calling cards were essential tools of social communication, carrying information far beyond a simple greeting. A calling card was a small, often ornately printed piece of cardstock displaying the visitor's name and sometimes family crest or emblem. Leaving a card at someone's home was not a casual gesture, it followed a highly codified process. Visitors were expected to present the card in a particular manner, often accompanied by a verbal greeting or message, and the order in which cards were left could convey subtle signals of respect, hierarchy, or disapproval. A correctly placed card indicated courtesy and attention, while a card left improperly, or not at all, could suggest rudeness, neglect, or social inferiority. The ritual surrounding calling cards was so pervasive that specialized manuals offered detailed instructions, guiding both the upper and middle classes through the intricate nuances of this essential social custom. The etiquette of calling cards reflected a broader Victorian belief in the moral dimension of social behavior. Actions were imbued with significance. They were not neutral gestures, but expressions of character and virtue. Leaving a calling card properly signaled attentiveness, refinement, and a commitment to social harmony. Conversely, failure to observe these customs could cast doubt on one's upbringing, judgment, or moral compass. In this way, seemingly minor acts were elevated to markers of social standing, illustrating the era's profound concern with perception, propriety, and the moral weight of daily conduct. Mourning rituals in Victorian England exemplify the intensity with which social customs shaped personal behavior. Death was a constant presence in a society still grappling with infectious disease, high infant mortality, and limited medical knowledge. In response, elaborate mourning practices developed, blending personal grief with public display. Widows, for example, were expected to wear black clothing for extended periods, sometimes years or even decades, signaling both their personal loss and adherence to social norms. Jewelry, often crafted from jet, onyx, or containing hair from the deceased, served as both a memorial and a visual cue of mourning. Post-mortem photography, in which the deceased were posed as if alive, was common, reflecting a desire to preserve memory and maintain social recognition of grief. These customs, while solemn, also reinforced social cohesion, ensuring that death and mourning were expressed in ways that aligned with communal expectations and moral standards. The rules of mourning extended beyond clothing and adornment to daily conduct. Conversations, social visits, and public appearances were all governed by guidelines designed to demonstrate appropriate decorum. Excessive cheerfulness or participation in frivolous activities could be seen as disrespectful, while appropriate restraint signaled virtue, sensitivity, and moral propriety. Even the tone of voice, the choice of words, and the timing of social engagement were scrutinized, reflecting a culture in which personal behavior was inseparable from social judgment. Mourning customs reveal the Victorian obsession with the interplay between individual emotion and societal expectation, demonstrating how deeply etiquette, morality, and social signaling were intertwined. Beyond mourning and visiting rituals, the Victorians developed a vast array of formalized behaviors to structure social life more broadly. Dining etiquette, for example, was highly prescriptive. Every aspect of a meal, from seating arrangements and the order of courses to the handling of cutlery and napkins, was regulated. Hosts were responsible for ensuring that guests observed these rules, and failure to do so could lead to embarrassment or social censure. Table manners were seen not only as reflections of personal refinement, but also as indicators of moral character. To eat properly, to observe the correct posture, and to demonstrate attentiveness to others was to signal virtue, respect, and awareness of social hierarchy. Meals were, in essence, microcosms of Victorian social structure, where behavior reinforced order, hierarchy, and ethical conduct. Even leisure activities were framed by etiquette. Social dances, concerts, and theater visits were accompanied by codified behaviors that ensured harmony, respect, and propriety. Dancing required adherence to rules of invitation, partnership, and movement, with missteps potentially signaling ignorance or poor upbringing. Attendance at concerts or theatrical performances carried expectations regarding dress, seating, and conduct, reflecting the belief that cultural participation was both a privilege and a responsibility. Through these practices, the Victorians cultivated a society in which personal enjoyment was inseparable from social accountability, emphasizing that every action, no matter how private, contributed to communal order. Fashion itself was a vehicle for social signaling and adherence to custom. Clothing was not merely functional or decorative, it was a means of communicating identity, class, and morality. Fabrics, colors, and styles were chosen with careful attention to societal expectations, seasonal appropriateness, and personal status. For women, corsets, layers of petticoats, and elaborate hats conveyed refinement and virtue, while men adhered to strict codes of tailoring, accessories, and grooming. Dress codes were reinforced through social pressure, publications, and even legal restrictions in some contexts. In this way, fashion was both a tool of conformity and an expression of social literacy, demonstrating an individual's ability to navigate the intricate web of Victorian etiquette. Victorian social customs also extended into more intimate spheres, shaping family life, education, and personal relationships. Children were taught decorum, politeness, and respect from a young age, with parents and tutors emphasizing the moral significance of behavior. Proper posture, speech, and conduct were drilled, not merely for aesthetic reasons, but as reflections of moral character. Games, play, and education were structured to reinforce these values, ensuring that the next generation internalized the principles of propriety and social awareness. The socialization process was rigorous, reflecting a belief that the maintenance of societal order depended on the cultivation of disciplined, virtuous individuals. Gift, giving, and correspondence were similarly governed by meticulous rules. Letters, parcels, and tokens of affection were carefully chosen, presented, and delivered according to established norms. The wording of a letter, the choice of stationery, and the timing of delivery could convey messages of gratitude, respect, or social alignment. Gifts were evaluated not only for their material value, but for their appropriateness, taste, and symbolic significance. The Victorians believed that attention to these details reinforced social bonds, demonstrated moral sensitivity, and ensured harmony within the complex lattice of interpersonal relationships. Even seemingly mundane acts, such as walking in public or interacting with strangers, were shaped by custom. Sidewalks, carriages, and public squares were arenas in which behavior was regulated by expectation. Proper posture, eye contact, and engagement were all carefully observed, and deviations could be interpreted as signs of ill-breeding or moral laxity. Social encounters, even fleeting ones, carried potential significance, reinforcing a pervasive culture of observation, judgment, and accountability. This emphasis on conduct created a society in which personal behavior was inseparable from social perception, illustrating the extent to which etiquette shaped daily life. Religion and morality were deeply intertwined with social customs. Church attendance, charitable work, and participation in community rituals were expected, with noncompliance potentially marking individuals as morally suspect. Public expressions of piety were as important as private devotion, reflecting a belief that virtue was demonstrated through action, ritual, and adherence to communal norms. Social customs thus operated as mechanisms of moral education, ensuring that behavior aligned with both religious and societal expectations. The Victorian emphasis on observation extended to personal habits and grooming. Hair, nails, and skin were carefully maintained, with elaborate routines and products designed to optimize appearance and hygiene. Cosmetics were used sparingly, as excessive display was considered improper, yet cleanliness, grooming, and modest adornment were markers of respectability. These practices illustrate the era's concern with the visual codification of virtue, demonstrating how appearance, behavior, and morality were inseparable components of social identity. In business and professional settings, etiquette dictated negotiation, correspondence, and hierarchy. Letters, contracts, and meetings followed precise protocols, with deviations potentially undermining credibility or respect. The language of communication, including the use of titles, salutations, and phrasing, was carefully controlled, reflecting the belief that professionalism and decorum were moral as well as practical imperatives. Victorian social customs thus extended beyond the private sphere, shaping the economic, political, and intellectual life of the nation. Education was another domain in which etiquette played a central role. Schools emphasized discipline, respect for authority, and adherence to codes of conduct. Classrooms were structured environments in which punctuality, posture, and attentiveness were rigorously enforced. Students were taught not only academic knowledge, but also the principles of decorum, reinforcing the idea that moral and social education were inseparable. The cultivation of these behaviors reflected a broader Victorian philosophy that social harmony, moral development, and personal success depended on the internalization of careful, deliberate conduct. Gender roles were deeply embedded within these social customs. Men and women were expected to observe complementary behaviors, with clear distinctions in public and private conduct. Women were associated with virtue, nurturing, and propriety, while men were linked to leadership, responsibility, and protection. These expectations were reinforced through clothing, speech, and social interactions, shaping opportunities, relationships, and personal identity. The elaborate rules governing gendered behavior underscore the pervasive influence of social customs, revealing a society in which every action, appearance, and interaction was scrutinized for alignment with prescribed norms. Etiquette books, advice manuals, and periodicals circulated widely, codifying these expectations for readers across the country. These texts provided detailed guidance on virtually every aspect of behavior: how to greet visitors, navigate social events, conduct oneself at meals, dress appropriately for occasions, and maintain moral and social propriety. The widespread availability of such literature illustrates the extent to which social norms were both taught and enforced, creating a shared framework of behavior that transcended class and geography. The attention to detail in Victorian social customs was remarkable. Whether in public spaces, private homes, or professional environments, individuals were constantly aware of the expectations surrounding them. Every action, from the tilt of the head to the placement of a hand on a table, could carry meaning. The meticulous observation and adherence to custom created a society in which order, predictability, and propriety were highly valued. Yet this also required a remarkable degree of self-discipline, attentiveness, and memory, demonstrating the cognitive and emotional demands placed on individuals navigating social life. Humor and creativity were not absent from these customs, despite their rigidity. People often found ways to subtly play with or interpret the rules, using wit, gesture, and language to navigate complex social situations. The social ritual became a form of performance, where skill, intelligence, and subtlety could be demonstrated alongside obedience and respect. In this way, the Victorians managed to combine seriousness and creativity, discipline and expression, within a system that might otherwise appear oppressive or rigid. Even hospitality was governed by precise norms. Hosts were expected to anticipate needs, maintain decorum, and create an atmosphere of respect and comfort. Guests, in turn, observed rules of politeness, gratitude, and restraint. Meals, conversations, seating arrangements, and timing were all orchestrated to reinforce social harmony and demonstrate moral and social sophistication. The careful choreography of hospitality reflects the broader Victorian belief in the moral and social significance of behavior, underscoring the integration of ethics, aesthetics, and ritual into everyday life. In essence, the quirky social customs of Victorian England were not trivial. They were deeply embedded mechanisms of order, morality, and identity. From calling cards to mourning rituals, from fashion to dining, every aspect of life was infused with expectation, observation, and significance. These customs created a society in which behavior, appearance, and etiquette were inseparable from morality, social standing, and personal identity. They reveal a culture intensely concerned with propriety, harmony, and refinement, yet one capable of creativity, subtlety, and nuance within the framework of its rules. Through the lens of these customs, we gain insight into the Victorian worldview, a society that valued discipline, observation, and careful cultivation of the self. Social behavior was a reflection of moral character, a signal of status, and a tool for maintaining order in an era of rapid social and technological change. The eccentricity, rigidity, and meticulousness of these customs may seem peculiar today, yet they reveal a civilization profoundly invested in the intersection of morality, behavior, and identity. Victorian social customs, in their complexity and variety, offer a window into a world in which even the smallest actions carried weight. They remind us that history is not only shaped by grand events and political decisions, but by the ordinary, repetitive, and codified behaviors of individuals. By understanding these customs, we gain not only a sense of the era's rules and expectations, but also an appreciation for the cultural values, moral priorities, and imaginative strategies that guided daily life. They show us that even what appears quaint or peculiar can provide profound insight into the human experience, revealing the ways in which society, morality, and individual behavior are inextricably linked. The meticulous attention to social ritual, the codification of manners, and the integration of morality into everyday actions demonstrate the unique fabric of Victorian life. Each handshake, each bow, each placement of a calling card was a performance of virtue, respect, and propriety. Every interaction, every piece of clothing, every public gesture carried meaning, reinforcing the structure and hierarchy of society. The quirkiness of these customs, their complexity and rigidity, ultimately reflect the Victorians' extraordinary commitment to cultivating a world in which order, morality, and social cohesion were paramount, yet navigable through intelligence, observation, and subtle creativity. In studying these customs today, we are invited to consider not only the peculiarities of Victorian life, but also the enduring human concerns they reflect. People have always sought to understand their place in society, to communicate respect, to demonstrate virtue, and to navigate complex social networks. The Victorians' elaborate systems of etiquette, their attention to detail, and their careful cultivation of appearance and conduct are extreme examples of universal human impulses. They reveal a culture in which the ordinary was infused with significance, the everyday ritualized, and the performance of morality made visible in the minutiae of life. Victorian England is often remembered for its advances in science, industry, and culture, but one of the most striking aspects of the era is its profound and often unsettling preoccupation with death. Unlike many modern societies, where death is frequently hidden from public view and mourned in private, the Victorians treated death as a public, ceremonial, and highly codified event. It was woven into the very fabric of life, from daily routines and home decoration to fashion, literature, and social interaction. This obsession with mortality reflected not only high rates of disease and early death, but also a philosophical and spiritual engagement with life's transience. Understanding the Victorian approach to death provides a fascinating window into their values, fears, and social norms, revealing a culture deeply invested in ritual, symbolism, and the moral significance of human existence. The high mortality rates of Victorian England contributed significantly to this cultural focus on death. Infant mortality was alarmingly high, with 1 in 4 children failing to reach their 5th birthday, and epidemics of diseases such as cholera, tuberculosis, and smallpox were common. Life expectancy, though rising by the late 19th century, remained far below modern standards. Families frequently confronted death at home, often witnessing the slow decline of loved ones due to illness. Unlike today, where hospitals and specialized care often separate the dying from daily family life, the Victorians experienced death intimately and personally. This proximity to mortality shaped both their emotional responses and their social practices, making death an ever-present reality that demanded ritual, preparation, and public acknowledgement. One of the most visually striking manifestations of Victorian death culture was the practice of post-mortem photography. In an era before widespread photography, families sought to preserve the memory of their loved ones in a tangible, visual form. Photographers would pose the deceased in lifelike positions, often seated or surrounded by family, creating the illusion of continued presence. Infants and children were particularly common subjects, as their early death was heart-breakingly frequent. These photographs were displayed in the home, passed down through generations, and kept as precious mementos. While modern viewers may find post-mortem photography unsettling, for Victorians it was an expression of love, grief, and the desire to maintain connection with those who had passed. It was also a reflection of a society in which mourning was not private but publicly enacted, visually codified, and socially acknowledged. Mourning attire was another central element of Victorian death culture. Clothing served as a visible, socially enforced marker of grief, signaling status, propriety, and emotional engagement. Black clothing, often made of heavy fabrics such as crepe or silk, was worn by widows and other mourners for extended periods, sometimes for years. Jewelry made from jet, onyx, or even the hair of the deceased served as memorial objects, worn to display continued connection and reverence. The rules of mourning dress were complex, specifying not only color but fabric, trim, and layering according to the mourner's relationship to the deceased and the stage of mourning. These sartorial customs reflected a deeply held belief in the moral significance of grief, in the idea that outward appearance could communicate inner virtue, and in the necessity of performing mourning with dignity, decorum, and social awareness. The domestic environment was also shaped by the presence of death. Homes contained memorial objects such as framed locks of hair, photographs, and elaborate memorial plaques. Furniture and room arrangement often reflected the conventions of mourning, with parlors kept ready for receiving visitors to express condolences or observe rituals. In wealthier households, entire rooms might be dedicated to remembrance, adorned with candles, wreaths, and symbolic objects designed to honor the deceased. These practices illustrate the pervasiveness of death in Victorian life, demonstrating how even private spaces were integrated into a social and moral system of commemoration. Funerals themselves were highly ritualized events, serving both personal and social functions. They were meticulously planned with formal processions, carefully chosen attire, and prescribed roles for family members, clergy, and professional mourners. Coffins were often elaborate, crafted with fine wood and brass fittings, and sometimes lined with satin or velvet. Pallbearers, undertakers, and mourners were expected to perform their roles with precision, reflecting the moral and social importance of the ceremony. Funerals were public displays of grief and respect, opportunities to honor the deceased while demonstrating propriety, social awareness, and adherence to cultural norms. The elaborate nature of these rituals underscores the Victorian belief that death, while inevitable, demanded dignity, reverence, and careful management. Cemeteries were designed as spaces of both mourning and reflection, blending natural beauty with solemnity. Victorian cemeteries often featured winding paths, landscaped gardens, and ornate tombstones. Monuments and gravestones were crafted with symbolism, incorporating motifs such as angels, weeping figures, and religious iconography. These spaces served not only as burial sites, but as public arenas for memory, contemplation, and social interaction. Families visited graves regularly, maintaining monuments and leaving tokens of remembrance. In this way, death remained a tangible, visible, and socially integrated aspect of daily life, reinforcing the cultural emphasis on ritual, memory, and moral engagement. The Victorians' engagement with death extended into literature and the arts. Poetry, novels, and essays frequently explored themes of mortality, loss, and the afterlife. Writers such as Alfred Lord Tennyson, Emily Bront, and Thomas Hardy examined grief, spiritual uncertainty, and the inevitability of death with emotional intensity. Illustrations, paintings, and public exhibitions often depicted funerals, mourning scenes, or allegorical representations of mortality. These cultural expressions reflected and reinforced social norms, providing both guidance and reflection on the rituals, emotions, and moral responsibilities associated with death. Through literature and art, the preoccupation with mortality became a shared cultural experience, shaping perception, behavior, and imagination. Religious belief played a central role in shaping Victorian attitudes toward death. Christianity, particularly in its Anglican and nonconformist forms, emphasized both the moral significance of life and the promise of an afterlife. Death was framed as a transition, a moment of moral reckoning, and